Well, good afternoon and welcome to the prophetic update from the gate for December the 2nd of 2024. Wow, we're on the last month of our civil calendar year in this part of the world. And so I ran across that picture the other day and I thought it was so fun. She was seeing herself in the monitor of the computer and she thought it was great that she could see herself on the computer. So anyway, I just had to put that up for a few minutes. 1999. There wasn't quite as much white hair in the beard. The beard, you can see there's a little touch starting of white started in the beard. My hair actually started turning gray on one side of my beard before it turned gray anywhere else. So, oh goodness, when was 1999? How many years ago? 25 years ago. 25 years ago. So anyway, so she was born in 92, so she'd have been like 7 years old in that picture. So I thought it was a lot of fun. Anyway, so I told Angie I was going to throw it up there, and she didn't have no objection to it. So just remember the good memories. That's good memories. All right. As you're coming on, let us know that you're there. Say hello, hit a like. Feel free to make comment, ask questions as we get into this process tonight, as we get into the prophetic update. And we want you to be a part of the broadcast with us. So it's good to see you on there. I see Sister Lucy and Sister Sharon and Sister Elizabeth are on there. I know Garland and Gracie. If you're, I guess you assume you're all the way back home. So we're going to do Gracie. Say Gracie's there. Garland and Sherry and Ginger over on the YouTube side that we see and that we know are there. There's more watching, it says, but at least we know those are there. Buddy. And so we want you to be a part of it. Buddy, come on, buddy. Yep, there you are. Hello, buddy. Claude, good to have you on. Buddy Claude on there. So anyway, just we want y'all to feel like you're part of it. Feels like it's been a while since I've been sitting here, and it has been. Didn't do any prophetic updates through the week of Thanksgiving, and so now we're on the other side of that and getting ready. And we're coming up to we've gone past the new moon, and now we're in the month of Hanukkah. And so we're going to go. Oh, and by the way, we can say what's it called? What's the name of that place called? Home Goods.
Yeah.
We were at Home Goods today, and Home Goods has a very small section. It's just a little in section,
Not
but
bad, though.
no, it was. It had some really nice Hanukkah stuff. So if you have a Home Goods store, I don't know where all they are. If you have a Home Goods store somewhere around you, they have a Hanukkah section. They've got candles and menorahs and decorations
Hobby
and
Lobby quit on it.
yeah. Hobby Lobby don't around us said they hadn't carried any for 2 years, so I don't know about
Cleveland
around
either,
you.
Heather said.
Yeah, Heather said there wasn't any in Cleveland, but Home Goods. First time we've been to the one here in Maryville because Heather had mentioned it, and so we were in town picking up some things today. And so if you're looking for Hanukkah decorations or menorahs or candles or anything you might need as a part of it, why, if you've got a Home Goods close by, why go try one of those and see if your Home Goods happens to have Hanukkah stuff. That's not as easy to find as it used to be, and so. Or I don't know how you say it used to be. It's not that easy to find Hanukkah stuff, at least the decorations and things, other than online. You can always find it online. All right. So welcome to the broadcast, and let's get into this tonight. We'll say a word of prayer, praying one for another, asking God to minister to us. We got several things we want to go over tonight. I want to get into my main topic up here. At least before we get too far into this, so I've got plenty of time to go over that. Now, if you normally, and I'm sorry it takes a little time, and I didn't get into texting everybody, so if you normally get an email from me with an outline, I actually have, because of the nature of tonight's topic, I emailed you a 2-page little outline that I'll be using tonight, so you might want to check your email. And in your email, you'll find a copy of that outline. Now, if I don't have your email, sorry, I can't get it to you. If you want me to email you outlines from time to time of whatever I have, whether it's a Monday night or a Wednesday night, or even when I use one on Shabbat, you're welcome to. I'll put the information up at the end of the broadcast, and you can send that to that email address, make a request for outlines of whatever I may have him available for that particular Bible study or prophetic update or Shabbat or whatever it may be. Clean my glasses off a little bit, had a hair on it. Did you notice the Elvis teardrop glasses that I had on there in 1999? Because we were in Millington, which is just outside of Memphis, in 1999. Those actually turned at night, or in the daylight, like these do, so they became sunglasses. So definitely had that on there. Hey, Mark and Darlene are on with us as well. Good to have you all as part of the broadcast tonight. So, several things to go over. Let's have a word of prayer, and then we'll get into the topics, plural, for tonight. Father God, we do thank you tonight. We praise you for your goodness and your grace and your mercy. Father, you are at work in this world today. We see a lot of things that are going on, a lot of things that remind us of the season and the time and the day that we are in, but we also trust you in the midst of all of this, that you have everything in your hand, most of all, that you have us in your hand. And so we're not doing anything, we're going to do our best not to do anything to squirm out of your hand or to get out of your reach or try to run away from what you are doing in our own lives. But Father God, we're believing you. I pray for healing and wholeness for those who are still battling with sickness and illness. Make divine provision and direction and insight, Father God, for those who need it tonight. We're trusting you in all things. As we studied in the Torah portion, even in a time of famine, Father, you can cause us to prosper, cause us to have all that we need in abundance more than what we need. So we're trusting you, believing you, that in all things you are in control. And we thank you for that tonight, Father, in Yeshua's mighty name. Amen. Amen. All right, well, let's do some updates. There is a lot of things going on, but the thing dominating the news tonight, all day long today, is because yesterday, and some of you, I know everybody doesn't watch the news, and I don't know if you get the updates on your phone, if you got your phone set to receive updates, even though you may not watch the news channels. But yesterday, President Biden gave a full pardon to his son, Hunter Biden. He had said over and over and over again through his presidency that he trusted the justice system. He was not going to pardon Hunter. They had said it from the podium of the press conferences from the White House over and over and over again. I heard a commentator say today that he began his presidency with a lie, and he is going to end his presidency with a lie. So yesterday, after much deliberation, he decided it was time because his son had been selectively and unfairly prosecuted. And so he offered him a pardon. So this wasn't just an ordinary pardon from what he was dealing with right now. This was, they called it a sweeping pardon. He pardoned him of anything he may have committed or taken part in from January the 1st of 2014 to January the 1st of 2024. So it's 11 years. He covered 11 years of his son's life and pardoned him from anything that he may have committed or taken part in. Now, this has set the internet and the news services on fire. There's all kinds of debate about this, pro and con. Trump has now weighed in on it. He had a lot of comments to say about that, and he's talked about that if Hunter Biden was selectively and unfairly prosecuted and targeted politically because he was the president's son, then Trump was saying these other things that we feel like were politically targeted and unfair. So Trump, when he comes in, he may do some sweeping pardons himself of some of the things that have taken place against him, against family, against friends, going all the way to the January 6th issue. So he may come in and do quite a few pardons. We don't know. I said he may come in and do that because he is really railing on this on Truth Social and in the media. So anyway, all right. The other thing that's going on right now, one of the other things that's going on that's very important is that the U.S. and France have brokered a ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. You're hearing it talked as if it's a ceasefire with Hezbollah, but they actually brokered the ceasefire with Lebanon. Israel's actually not fighting Lebanon, the country. They are fighting Hezbollah, who is a segment of Lebanon. They do have controlling interest and power in the government, but the ceasefire isn't specifically with Hezbollah. And so the Biden administration is working very hard to try to gain some legacy, some things that they can point to, on their way out that they've done. So they pressured Israel by telling Israel that they would totally embargo them on any ammunitions, on any weapons of any kind, if they did not agree to this ceasefire. And so the ceasefire actually was for 60 days, which would mean that it would go into the beginning of the Trump administration, because we're like 50-something days away from the inauguration day. And so this is a ceasefire with Lebanon. Why? Well, I'm going to read you something, and Mark was just up there. I got this book from Mark, and I'll get it back to you eventually. I'm using this and reading on it. This book is called The Truth About Palestine, and in the book, it has a segment of the charter of Hezbollah. Now, Hezbollah came into being back in 1980 or 1979. Okay. After the Islamic Revolution, they came into being in the early 80s, right after that, I think. But anyway, so one of Iran's first projects after the revolution was to form terrorist organization Hezbollah in Lebanon. Okay, so Hezbollah was their first and is considered their best proxy that they use in the fight against Israel. It was Hezbollah that was the first to use suicide terrorists. From having started as a small and insignificant minority movement, after 44 years, it has taken over all of Lebanon. And here's an excerpt from the Hezbollah program of 1985. Now, this is why they're saying this, that they brokered a deal with the government of Lebanon. And even though Hezbollah is a ruling power, but the official government is of Lebanon, and that's who the truce is with. But Israel does not attack Lebanese soldiers or Lebanese structures. They only attack what belongs to Hezbollah. So I'm going to read this there's 3 paragraphs here. I want you to listen closely to this charter, and it'll explain to you why Hezbollah is not really paying that much attention to this ceasefire. They are hoping that Israel will, but Israel has reserved the right to strike them every time they violate it, and they keep violating it every other day, if not every day. And here's from the charter of Hezbollah. We see in Israel the vanguard of the United States in our Islamic world. A vanguard is a beginning of an army, okay? Is the forming of an army. It's the forming of a resistance. So they see what Israel's doing as just being a proxy for the United States coming into the Middle East and taking over the Islamic world. It is the hated enemy that must be fought until the hated ones get what they deserve. This enemy is the greatest danger to our future generations and to the destiny of our lands, particularly as it glorifies the ideas of settlement and expansion initiated in Palestine, and yearning outward to the extension of the great Israel from the Euphrates to the Nile. Now they've actually got that in there. This is that they believe Israel wants to extend from the Euphrates to the Nile. Why would they say that? Because they know, and you know if you read your scriptures, that the promise to Abraham, the land that he would give to Abraham's descendants, which we know as Israel or the Jewish people or greater as the Israel, would stretch from the Euphrates River to the Nile River. So the territory of Israel that God promised to Israel through Abraham is much greater than the little strip of land about the size of New Jersey that is Israel right now. They will get that extension when the kingdom is established on earth, with Yeshua sitting on the throne on the Temple Mount. But for right now, they see that they're afraid that's what's going to happen. They're going to expand and take over this. Guess what? Their fears are going to be real, but it's not going to happen until Messiah comes. Our primary assumption in our fight against Israel states that the Zionist entity is aggressive from its inception and built on lands wrestled from their owners at the expense of the rights of the Muslim people. Therefore, listen to this, therefore our struggle will end only when this entity, Israel, is obliterated, wiped out. We recognize no treaty with it, no ceasefire, no peace agreements, whether separate or consolidated. So the very charter of Hezbollah says we will not recognize a treaty or a ceasefire or a peace agreement in any form or fashion with this entity known as Israel. We vigorously condemn all plans for negotiations with Israel and regard all negotiators as enemies. So if the Lebanese government negotiates with Israel, okay, right now it was negotiated with France and the United States. Israel agreed to it, but Israel didn't do the negotiating. This was done by the United States, France, and Lebanon. They said if there any negotiator with Israel, we considered an enemy, for the reason that such negotiations is nothing but the recognition of the legitimacy of the Zionist occupation of Palestine. Therefore, we oppose and reject the Camp David agreements. These are some older agreements. The proposals of King Fahd, the Fez and the Reagan plan, Brezhnev's and the French-Egyptian proposals, and all other programs that include the recognition, even the implied recognition, of the Zionist entity Israel. So,
isn't it Jonathan Cahn's new book that brings up about Philistia and the
Yeah,
Palestinians
the
in Gaza.
yeah, Palestinians in Gaza are the old Philistines. Jonathan Kahn brings that up, shows it from Scripture, where they are connected historically to the Philistines and are one of the ancient enemies of Israel. So, what it's saying is, the United States brokered this ceasefire. It was only a 60-day ceasefire. Israel said that they would receive it. They didn't have any choice because Biden said if you don't accept it, we're going to cut off all arms. They don't produce a lot of arms into Israel, not enough to continue a major event, a major war. So they can't broaden it too much until they do something about that situation, be able to rearm. So this 60 days will give Israel an opportunity to rearm because once they accepted the peace proposal, Biden approved the arms sale to Israel worth $680 million. So Biden at least kept his word, and he approved a $680 million arms deal to Israel, but it was leveraged on a forced ceasefire agreement that Hezbollah won't honor and Israel didn't want. Because actually the ceasefire deal with Lebanon had nothing to do with the hostages. Now, Trump, on his Truth social media platform, had something to say today concerning the hostages. So it says, Trump promises all hell to pay if hostages are not released. So here is part of his message on Truth Social. All right. Said, if the hostages are not released by the time he takes office on January the 20th, and here's the statement, is everybody is talking about the hostages who are being held so violently, inhumanely, and against the will of the entire world in the Middle East. But it's all talk and no action. Please let this truth serve to represent that if the hostages are not released prior to January 20th of 2025, the date that I will proudly assume the office as President of the United States, there will be all hell to pay in the Middle East, and for those in charge who perpetrated these atrocities against humanity. Those responsible will be hit harder than anybody has been hit in the long and storied history of the United States of America. And in all capital letters it says, release the hostages now. Okay? This comes after the American-Israeli Omar Nutra, who was raised to the degree of the IDF captain, was declared dead after being abducted along with his fellow soldiers from his tank on October the 7th in 2023. So Trump is saying because there's still American hostages that he is going to well, using his words, and if you don't like the expression, sorry, that's what he said, that there's going to be hell to pay for all of those involved if the hostages aren't all released by January the 20th. Now, if you don't think that has any, that what Trump is saying and doing has any weight, know what's going on here. Pay attention to what's happening. Hamas, they said that there are negotiations in the background, not public ones, but in the background, between Israel and Hamas going on right now. Now we've got Hezbollah. They're saying they're willing to talk with. They want a ceasefire. They want a ceasefire, even against their own charter, that they're willing to accept one because they're being devastated by Israel. Remember, Israel was expecting to lose tens of thousands of soldiers whenever they begin to take on Hezbollah. And that has just not happened. It's very reminiscent of what happened to us when the U.S. went into Iraq, expecting thousands and thousands of casualties as they went against the royal guard of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. And basically they ran, they were devastated by the bombing. They did not even put up resistance. And so the same thing is happening to Israel. Yes, they're losing soldiers, tens, 20s. They're not losing tens of thousands. They're losing tens and 20s, which are sad to say, but that actually has been taking place. And so this is very important. And so we're seeing this. Matter of fact, Trump's not even in office yet, but again, he has received a visit from Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, went to Mar-a-Lago to meet with him. These people who are calling him a fascist, calling him a Hitler. Trudeau was one of those as well. That's talking about how a threat to democracy was. Now he's down at Mar-a-Lago, all smiles, meeting with Trump, which, by the way, Trudeau is probably, there's a recall out on him, and there's having a recall election. He probably won't even be in power more than a few months once Trump gets in, if the recall goes into effect, whenever that election takes place. But still, Trump had said, if you don't stop the border, because there's been tens of thousands of people crossing the northern border now, not just the southern border, and there's been over, I don't remember if it's 1,900 or 19,000 known terrorists come across the border of Canada up in the New York area, up in the New England area. They've crossed the border. So Trump said, I'm going to put 100% tariff on Canadian goods if you don't block the border. So Trudeau came down to see Trump and told him that a 100% tariff on Canadian goods would destroy the Canadian economy. And Trump's response was, well, if you don't stop up your border, I guess Canada could just become the 51st state of the United States then, because we're not going to have it. We're not going to trade with you. We'll put 100% tariff on everything you produce, and there's a lot of cars produced in Canada. There's a lot of movies and TV series that are created in Canada. So there's a lot of commerce, a lot of farming commerce goes back and forth. The farmers in the Midwest, in Middle America, they do a lot of trade with Canada. So there's a lot of trade goes on there. I think Garland, who's over here on our side, they do a lot of work right on the Canadian border, back and forth. Some of the bridge he's working on a bridge that goes across through there now as an electrician. But the thing is, there's a lot there, and he's basically said, I'll shut Canada down if you don't stop the border. And people said, well, the tariffs wouldn't work. Well, he promised the same thing to Mexico, and guess what? Mexico, the new lady president of Mexico, there were 2 caravans on their way to America trying to get across the border, trying to get to the border before Trump came into office, and guess what? She stopped both of them. Now, she's saying she didn't make any promises publicly, but suddenly they stopped 2 caravans, and they haven't stopped a caravan in almost 4 years, and now they've stopped 2 of them in the last week or so that was headed toward the border. So these people are listening. Now, Zelensky and Putin are talking a brokered peace deal that could stop the Ukrainian war, because Trump's saying, I'll stop that war as well, because he means business. You got to realize, when it came to Iran, Trump is for bombing their oil facilities, bombing their nuclear facilities, bombing their infrastructure, and bombing them back to the 1800s if they didn't stop some of this stuff in the Middle East. So he doesn't play games. This is what you call peace through strength. That people who are very much against those things are saying, he's uncontrolled, he's a wild gun, saying all these things to do all these things. But people are paying attention, and none of them wants, even China does not want to lose America as a customer, and he's threatening tariffs on them. He can't put any tariffs on, but just the threat of him coming into office and putting on tariffs is causing people to set up and take notice. So I've wondered, what can you do to stop, because he keeps saying he'll stop the war in the Middle East, he'll stop the war in Ukraine. But you see what he's doing. He is economically threatening to put them in an economic position that'll crash their economies, and none of them can afford any of that. Middle East wants America as a customer, but America also wants free flow of traffic and free flow of. Now they're still the Yemen is still shooting. They shot a rocket at one of our ships. That doesn't ever work. It gets shot down. And so he's also threatened Yemen and any of the other proxies of Iran. He said, we'll take all of you on. We'll stop every one of you. All right? So, and at the same time, we're now getting that Abbas, the chairman of the Palestinian Authority, is preparing for a potential transition of leadership. Because now the PA and some of the people in some of the Palestinians in charge of the West Bank, as well as those who've been in charge of Gaza, and Hamas is trying to get in on the deal to set up a civilian governing authority for Gaza when the war ends. Israel will have nothing to do with that. They are not going to accept anything run by Hamas, that Hamas is still intact or still has anything to do with it. They've said so much. So those things are all going on right now. And we're in a prophetic season, okay? And tonight I want to talk about a prophecy. Now, when you're looking at prophecies in the Old Testament, let me make a comparison here. Let me pull this up. This is not on your papers. If you got papers, Angie, this is going to be Psalm 22.
Hang on.
You just put up Psalm 22. When you look at prophecies in the Old Testament, it's not always a whole full chapter about a prophecy about an event. So you're reading along a story, and suddenly there's one line that's prophetic in it. Okay? Then you go on and you're reading along, and it's about the events that are taking place in that time, at that time, and suddenly there's another line of prophecy in there. Psalms 22 is like that. And it has prophecies of the crucifixion in it. It's David talking about how his enemies are dealing with him. This is before he's conquered everybody and put down everybody, but he's in the fight. His enemies are fighting with him. He's been running from Saul. He gets in, even when he gets into office, he's putting all these rebellions down, putting all these enemies, defeating them. But here's what it says, Psalms 22. I'm just going to read you a couple of scriptures out of it. So he's talking about himself, and he says, my God, why have you forsaken me? Verse 1. Well, that's a statement from Yeshua on the cross. But it's a prophetic statement by David. David's talking about himself, but it's a prophetic statement. Then he goes on down to it where it says, oh my God, I cry day by day and you do not answer. I cry by night and find no rest. Well, that's not about Yeshua. Yeshua didn't cry out to the Father and the Father not hear him day and night. So he's back to himself now. And he talks about how he's holy and enthroned, but you go on down a little bit, and there's more in here. I was going to hit a couple. You go down to verse 14. Now remember, he's talking about this, even verse 13, as they opened their mouth wide at me like a ravening and roaring lion, they gape on me with their mouths. It says in some translations, I am poured out like water, all my bones are out of joint. That was what happened to Yeshua on the cross. They never pierced his side, but his bones were all out of joint, because crucifixion, the way they hang you, pulls your bones out of joint. My heart is like wax. It's melted within my breast. My strength is dried up like a potsherd. My tongue sticks to my jaws, and you lay me in the dust of death. And so David is talking about how he feels, and he's given some metaphors and some analogies about how he's feeling. But in the midst of it, there are prophecies in 22 that are connected to the Messiah. I read you a couple of them. You can go back and read the whole chapter and look at it for yourself. In that chapter. So what I'm going to talk about here concerning Lebanon is a prophecy that in the midst of talking about the Assyrians and talking about some other events that are taking place in Isaiah's day, suddenly we find a prophecy that can be linked to what's going on right now in Lebanon. And it's Isaiah chapter 10, verse 34. Now, I'm going to read to you out of the King James Version. The reason I'm doing this is because this is going to become a word study, and to find out if you've got a Strong's Concordance, if you got a Strong's Concordance, or even on your Bible program on your computer, all your concordances and all your stuff and your Strong's and your Hebrew and your Greek is all linked to the King James Version, because that's been the traditional version for years. It's not the primary version we use, but for this, I put it in King James so that you can connect the words to the original language. All right. It says, it's speaking, and it says, and he shall cut down the thickets of the forest with iron, and Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one. All right. So you're getting a reference here. You're getting references scripturally. Let me pull back up a little bit of it here on my Bible program. Let me do this. Pardon me just a moment. I'm going back to Isaiah. I didn't put all this on the outline, so If you're looking, you're not going to find all this on the outline, but I'm in Isaiah chapter 10. Okay, we just read verse 34, but the verses above it, okay, the verses above it are woes to tyrants, Assyria, about the hypocrites shall be broken, and the remnant of Israel shall be saved. All right, and Israel shall be comforted. So he's talking about Israel in the last part of chapter 10, and that's why it's talking about he shall cut down, he not being God, but he being Israel, shall cut down the thickets of the forest with iron. I'll get to that in a moment. And Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one. Now, the word mighty one, the word that is there is Adir, A-D-I-R, okay? Adir. Now, what's interesting about this word Adir, it means a mighty one. The translations are nobles, excellence, mighty is one of the translations. But here, the King James relates it as a mighty one. So when you click on the term mighty one, it comes up as Adar or Adir. It's a root word, okay? It means to enlarge or powerful, excellent, godly, lordly, mighty, principle, worthy. A lot of definitions there, but it's translated here by a mighty one. So Lebanon will fall by a mighty one, by a deer. Lebanon will fall by a deer. Why is that important? Why is it prophetic about this time that we are in? Here is why. What you're seeing there is the IDF's F-35, their newest jets, the F-35, the Israeli version of it. Okay? They call it the Adir, the mighty one. So this jet that Israel has been using to bomb Lebanon relentlessly, all these bombings that you've seen, that you've read about, that's been on the news, they are, the majority of them, not every one of them, they still have some F-16s and other ones, but the majority of them, especially their most powerful ones, are these F-35 that is called the Adir, or the mighty one. So the scripture says that Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one. So what is causing Lebanon to be overtaken, Hezbollah to be defeated? What's causing the Lebanon to come to the table for a peace agreement? And Lebanon and Hezbollah, even though they're not participating in the structure, they are supposedly agreeing to it because they're just being basically destroyed. This is what they use to destroy the leadership, and the replacements of the leadership, and the replacements of the leadership was destroyed by the bombs carried by these Adir. It is a very powerful military plane that Israel uses. So when you look at this scripture that reads that they will they shall cut down the forest with iron, and Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one, it actually says that Lebanon will fall by an Adir, A-D-I-R, or the root word may be A-D-A-R. It's probably the root word of this, but it means a mighty one. That's the plane. So we see in that, they didn't say, the prophecy didn't say that Lebanon will fall by the bombing of an airplane. No, that would not have made sense. But Lebanon will fall by a mighty one. Now, Israel, there's several of Israel's armaments have biblical connections to them. They even have a tank, a large tank, one of the most powerful tanks, that's called Leviathan. Okay? And the reason they Leviathan is because what it says in the book of Job, that nobody but God can tame the Leviathan. Okay? So it's one of their most powerful tanks. All right, so we see from a obscure prophecy here, just mentioned in one sentence, because it's talked about Assyria, which is Syria. All right, and it's talked about, this prophecy said that Lebanon will fall by a mighty one. So we can see that unfolded. It's never fallen like this before that we're aware of, but suddenly this mighty one, the Adir, the plane, is bombing Lebanon into submission. I think that's a very interesting very interesting prophetic note that is just there. So when you're studying prophecy, you have to be aware of this. You can't just look. If you look at your headlines, now I'm looking at a King James Bible right now, and the heading of this particular section, if you were looking for something on Lebanon, it just says Israel is comforted with the promise of deliverance from Assyrians' subjugation, being conquered by Assyria. All right, because the northern kingdom was conquered by Assyria. Now, when you look at that, but if you don't read through it and do your research out by the name Lebanon, because Lebanon is mentioned like 100 times in Scripture by name, because it's in its ancient homeland. It's one of the few nations in the Middle East that is still in the ancient homeland that belonged to it from biblical times. The cedars of Lebanon is where there was a time that they were in trade agreements with Israel. They weren't always great enemies of Israel. That's where Solomon got the cedars for the temple and to build his palace. The cedars of Lebanon are very famous. The trees of Lebanon, not just the cedars, but other trees. They're known for their forests, because that's why it says the forest, okay, the thickets of the forest will be cut down with iron. All right. So let's talk about that for a moment, because that's a part of this prophecy as well. That their thickets, their forests, will be cut down with iron. Now, Israel has when they name their operations, from what I understand, is that Israel, their operations are named. Every police force, the armies, they always have some kind of a name. There was Operation Desert Storm. I was referring to it earlier when we went into Iraq. It was Operation Desert Storm. So there's different operations, have different names to them. But Israel's computers generate the names for their operations. So this war that's going on in Israel now that began on October 7th, the name of this is Iron Sword. The Iron Sword. So this war that's continuing, that's expanding into Hezbollah, into Lebanon now, is a continuation of the Iron Sword. Now, I think they have another part of it is called the Northern Arrow, but it's still part of the Iron Sword. Now, this word here that's translated iron 73 times in the Scriptures, okay? The word is barzel, B-A-R-Z-E-L, and it's literally talking about iron as in cutting, okay? An iron implement, an axe. Some versions actually call it an axe. They shall cut down the thickets of the forest with an axe. All right? And this speaking of what Israel will do. This is not what Lebanon will do when they're selling trees and lumber to Israel or some other. Remember, this is what Israel is doing. He shall cut down the thickets of the forest with iron, and Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one, by an Nadir. So the reason that mentioned this is about iron is because iron not only is connected to a tool like an axe, and remember that most of your axes were also used in battle, but iron wasn't just an implement of a tool. Iron was an implement of swords, and they were creating weapons with iron. This was the age and the time referred to as the Iron Age. One of the things that made Rome so powerful, and remember in Daniel's vision, the legs were iron, and they were two legs, which divided the East and the West Empire, Roman Empire, is that it was iron. The legs were made of iron because Rome was powerful because they used iron in their weaponry when a lot of other nations didn't have access to iron. They had lesser metals like bronze, and some of them were still wooden and stone and things of that nature. But the iron weapons was the most powerful of the weapons. So this is a reference to weaponry that is cutting through the forests, okay, cutting down the trees. And also, trees are representative of people. It's not always just the trees. Trees and forests can represent peoples and groups of peoples when it comes to prophecy. All right. So tools were made of war, were made of iron. Tools and instruments of war were made of iron. Now in Deuteronomy chapter 27, verses 4 through 6, we have something interesting that is said, that is required by God. It says, when you have crossed the Jordan, he's speaking to Moses here in the Deuteronomy, at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. When you have crossed the Jordan, you are to set up these stones, as I am ordering you today, on Mount Ebal, and put plaster on them. He's telling them about the mountain of blessing, the mountain of cursing. You are to erect an altar to Adonai your God, an altar made of stones. You are not to use any iron tool on them, but are to build the altar of Adonai, from uncut stones, and you are to offer burnt offerings to Adonai on it, to Adonai your God on it. So God would not allow them to use iron tools in cutting the stones that would be used to build altars. All right? Later on, in Solomon's day, when he was building the temple, he would not allow iron tools to be used on the Temple Mount in the building of the temple. They had to quarry and form the stones away from Jerusalem, away from the Temple Mount, then bring them in already cut so that there wouldn't be the sounds of iron on the holy mountain. Why would that be? Well, from what I can gather, that God did not allow his altars. In several places it tells them not to put iron, not to use iron on the altars, that God did not allow it presumably because iron was an instrument of war. And God did not want his altars built and built by instruments of war. And so they would not allow the stones used in altars or the forming of any of the altars to be cut with iron. So these were the policies that Israel would abide by. So we have that Lebanon is being destroyed by a deer, a mighty one. The prophecy had two parts to it. Isaiah 10 and 34, that he, Israel, shall cut down the thickets of the forest with iron. And remember, that forest can represent people, so he is cutting down the soldiers. They are destroying the church with weapons of war, because iron was a weapon of war. All right? And Lebanon shall fall by a mighty one, and we've learned that they're F-35s, which are called the Adir, which Adir in Hebrew is the mighty one. So the mighty ones and the weapons of warfare are causing the fall of Lebanon, which has driven Lebanon to try, even on behalf of Hezbollah, to create a ceasefire, which isn't working. Because as I read you from the book earlier, from their own charter, Hezbollah refuses to enter into a treaty or a ceasefire with Israel. It's in their charter that they cannot do that. All right. So when you're looking at these prophecies, and here's I'm going to make another interesting connection here to these prophecies. All right. Isaiah 11 and 1. So remember, chapters and verses were added at a later time. They were not originally in the prophecies. So immediately after Lebanon is cut down with iron, and Lebanon falls to the mighty ones, to the Adir, and the forest of the people are cut down with iron, weapons of warfare, you get Isaiah 11 and 1. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. What is that? That's a messianic prophecy. So in connection with the sequence of events, even if you leave it in chapter and verse, the very next verse after this prophecy is a prophecy of the coming of Messiah. Now the rabbis use a term, and have been using the term for several decades now. There's several books out that have these terms on them. Some of them are rabbinical, some of them are Messianic rabbis, some of them are Christian theologians. But there's books out that are about either the footsteps or the heels of the Messiah. And the rabbis are teaching, a lot of the rabbis are teaching now, and have been for a while, and especially since this war began, that they are hearing the footsteps of Messiah, meaning or indicating that the Messianic age or the coming of Messiah is at hand. The rabbis look at it and they say, well, this is the Messiah is coming because we see these prophetic events as a prelude to the coming of Messiah. We say he's coming the second time. Of course, they say he's coming for the first time. All right? So, they are saying that we are in a time, in an era, and in a time, and we're seeing these events, and even the events that are taking place right now in between Israel and Lebanon are prophetic, leading up to the coming of Messiah. All right? So, what are we seeing? We're going to add one more thing to this to build on this prophetic sequence that seems to be taking place. A few months ago, at the Feast of Trumpets, which was in October the 3rd, I think, was the Feast of Trumpets this year, October, this couple of months back. But on the Hebraic calendar, it turned over the new year. We came into the year 5785. All right. Now we're fixing to come into 2025, but you see the 5 on the end is connections together, these two calendars. But the Hebrew calendar is 5785. 5,785. Now, when you're looking prophetically at it, you don't pay attention to the 5 because it's 5,000. That could go back 5,000 years. Or even the 700 going back 700 years, because we look at it of what's going on in our lifetime, what's going on currently. So 80 is the decade. Okay, this is the decade of the 80s. All right. And 5 is the year, 85. So this is 85. But every Hebraic word, every Hebrew word, has a numeric value to it. All right, so let's make this connection to the fact that Israel is breaking Lebanon. They're breaking Hamas. They are actually in the process, they are weakening Iran. There's also a revolution going on in Syria that's been kind of dormant for a few years, but suddenly sprang up, and the second largest city in Syria has been taken over by another group of Muslims. Okay, and so there's a civil war going there that's destabilizing Syria right now. It is not if they continue to progress, and they're making a lot of progress. If they're not stopped, they will topple the Assad army and the Assad government. Russia is now getting in on fighting against this rebellion because, and these people, they're not good guys, okay? This is not the good guys versus the bad guys. These are bad guys versus worse guys. These people that are fighting against the Syrian government of Assad, who is a terrorist in his own right, and has a civil war went there for a long time, but they were subdued, but now they're in a resurgence back, and they are remnants, they're a split off from Al-Qaeda. So these people that are rebelling against the Syrian army and the Syrian government are not good guys. They're just bad guys fighting against other bad guys. Remember, in the Islamic world, Sunnis and Shias, the two branches of Islam, don't like each other. They have fought and killed each other and tried to conquer each other for years, for generations. Since the 700s, when Islam kind of came into prominence, and so they have been fighting against each other because they both have a different version of Islam, and so and the more radical ones are the Shias, which is Iran and the Houthis and the Palestinians, and the more Western-oriented. They're not really peaceful, but they're more in line to agree with and to have treaties with the West, are the Sunnis, which is Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and more moderate Arabs, that are Arab Muslims like that. All right? So this is the year 5785. And as I was saying, every Hebrew word has a value to it. So what important Hebrew word has the value of 85? The important Hebrew word for this season we are in. It's also connected to this month. We just did our new moon last night. And so this word is connected to the new moon, the month we're in. But it's also connected to this year. The word is security. The Hebrew word for security has a value of 85. The Hebrew word for security has a value of 85. Now, why is that important? We know, and I feel we're seeing more. What we're seeing take place now is more connected to the Psalm 83 war, because the Psalm 83 war is a war between Israel and the people on its borders. Okay, people groups on its borders. Iran is getting involved a little bit, but it's more with the proxies of Iran is the problem with Israel right now, more than actually Iran is. All right, and other nations. Other nations are qualified, but when it comes time for the Ezekiel 38 war, which is a greater war against Israel, when Turkey gets involved, when some of the parts of Russia get involved, especially the stands, the Islamic stands of the old Soviet Union and Russia there in Syria. Syria becomes a part of it. Iraq, Iran, Somalia, which is actually says Ethiopia, which would be Somalia, because Ethiopia is not against Israel. They actually have a lot of Ethiopians that migrate to Israel, but that would be Somalia and Libya. All of these are Muslim nations. Okay, Egypt will get involved with it. They're involved with the Ezekiel 38 war. When all these people become against Israel, okay, they will come against Israel in a time when they have been in peace and security or safety. So there has to come a time before Ezekiel 38 that Israel feels at peace and in security. And so what we're seeing now, as this war, as the Psalm 83 is progressing and they are destroying the armies of the terrorists around them, and they're not done with that yet. We're not out of 83 yet. I think we are in 83 to some extent, because whether it's a declared war or just a war of a confederation war that comes against Israel in Psalms 83, however you want to look at it, we are in it, or they are in it. We are not in it. They are in it. All right? But it leads up. There's an important scripture that's connected, and it's 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 3. And that says, and I'm reading from the Complete Jewish Bible on this version, when people are saying everything is so peaceful and secure, when Israel has security, then destruction will suddenly come upon them, the way labor pains come upon a pregnant woman, and there is no way they will escape. So what it's saying is, when they feel like they're in peace and safety and security, that's why I went to the Complete Jewish, because it uses the word security there. They feel secure, they feel safe, okay? They feel at peace. Then sudden destruction will come upon them, because these nations will turn on them, and it will be far superior armies to what Israel has now. Far greater armies than what these terrorists have right now. That is Ezekiel 38. No way Israel can win that war, it's saying, but that's why, according to Ezekiel 38, God divinely intervenes and God destroys the armies of these nations as they come against Israel. He actually destroys 5 out of every 6 soldiers. 5 out of every 6 of them are killed on the mountains of Israel by God himself. Whether it's natural disasters, earthquakes, giant hailstones, fire, storms, we don't know exactly what kind of a natural event God will use, how he will strike them, whether he'll send angelic forces to destroy them. Israel may be prepared to fight, but they're not going to fight this battle. God is going to fight that battle. And we are going to see that battle. That's not a tribulation battle. That is a prior to the tribulation battle. Okay? So, because it's got to set them back up in a peaceful situation where the Antichrist can rise up and create a peace treaty with them that is supposed to last for 7 years. All right. So, we see setups still taking place. Setups are still taking place in all this that's going on. So the Middle East is in turmoil. We see a prophetic connection here. Pastor Angie put up the scriptures for you that are up there. If you want the little outline I've been using, even has the picture of the airplane on it. Okay, if you want my little 2-page outline to some of the scriptures and the definitions that I've used in here tonight, I'll be glad to email you one. I'll put up my email address here in just a moment, and we can talk about this. So this is unfolding. I put it as a question mark. Is this the Lebanon prophecy that's unfolding? It seems to be. We won't always know till you look back. you can't absolutely say, yeah, this is the one that's unfolding. But remember, prophecy is layered. Okay, it could fit something back in history, but it can also fit something in the future. Yeshua made this very clear when it talked about the abomination that makes desolation. The abomination of desolation is something that happened prior 200 years before the New Testament era, before Yeshua, in the Maccabean Wars with the Greeks, when the Israelites. This is what Hanukkah is about. When the Israelites threw off the Greek rule and defeated the Greek armies. Okay, that was the Greeks had done the abomination that makes desolation, or the abomination of desolation, which was the leader of the general of the Greek army that was ruling over that part of that. Antiochus Epiphanes. Epiphanes means he was Antiochus the god. He considered himself Antiochus the god. Antiochus Epiphanes. He came into the temple in Jerusalem. He slaughtered a pig on the altar of God and set up an idol of Zeus in the temple where the Holy of Holies should be. Okay? Because actually at that time, there was no Ark of the Covenant there. The Ark of the Covenant disappeared in the time of Jeremiah. So where the Ark, in the Holy of Holies, where the Ark should have stood, he set up a statue of Zeus there. The abomination that makes desolate. Yeshua said that you will see the abomination of desolation in the future as well. So it was a prophecy that was fulfilled in the past, but it also has a prophecy connected to the future. So if this prophecy has applied to Lebanon before, it's also applying to Lebanon right now as we see it unfolding. We see the Adir. For those of you who came on late, this is the Adir, the mighty one. In that prophecy I read you, where Lebanon would fall by a mighty one. This is the This is the Israeli F-35. Yes, they buy them from the United States. They make them their own, okay, like other nations do when they get them. But this is the Israeli version of the F-35. They call it the Adir, which in Hebrew means the mighty one. It is the one that has been bombing Lebanon into submission. So, is the prophecy that says Lebanon will fall by a mighty one, by an Adir, is that what we see unfolding? It looks like it. We won't absolutely know, maybe till we look back on it. But it has definitely led to Hezbollah being willing, even against their own charter, to accept some kind of a peace agreement, okay, because they've lost all their top leadership, all the first line of substitutes to their leadership, and the second line of substitutes to their leadership. They've lost all of that in the past few months as Israel is continually bombing them over and over and over, taking out the bombs. I think they said Israel had destroyed about 20,000 of their rockets in this campaign, as well as untold arms and munitions, thousands of fighters, and all of their leadership has been removed. And so that's why the ceasefire will give Israel a chance to retool. And the only reason they accepted it, and this is just summary for those of you who come on late, the only reason Israel accepted this ceasefire, that the United States and France brokered it with Lebanon, not with Hezbollah, with Lebanon, in hopes that Lebanon could control Hezbollah now that they've been decimated, all right, is because Biden said he will embargo all arms sales to them unless they accepted it. Israel did accept the ceasefire, 60-day ceasefire, and when they did, Biden did at least keep this promise. This is something he didn't lie about. He released $680 million in armaments to Israel. All right, so that's kind of where we are right now, what's going on with the war. They are still fighting in the south in Gaza. They are going to fight Hamas until they subdue it completely and fully, until they set up a provisional government of some kind down there. So all these things are still going on. Okay? Oh, and I have to put this back up. This has nothing to do with tonight's broadcast, other than I saw this picture. I love this picture. I had to put it back up. This is from 1999. This is for me and sweet little Ashley. And she is so excited because she has seen herself on Dad's computer. So this is from what? September the 24th of 1999. All right, that's a more dark-haired and dark-bearded me. You see the little grays coming in the beard there already. But that's Miss Ashley when she was like 7 years old, and she's discovered herself on Dad's computer. I just ran across that picture and had to put it up tonight. Anyway, all right. If you need to get a hold of us, if you want to send me an email that you would like to have copies of my outlines, if you got a way to print them out, why you can go ahead and email me. This is the information here. This is my post office box. This is the post office box to the ministry. That email address, you can send a request to thegate@destinysgate.org, and I will be glad to respond back to you and send you copies of any outlines that I use. That's our website. We are on apps, both on Google Play and Apple App Store, and of course we're broadcasting through YouTube Live and through Facebook Live. And so you can catch us on any of those platforms, or we're broadcasting to the website as always. If something happens that we can't get through on any of the other platforms, we will always be on our apps and always be on our website. That's the reason that we have that. Anna, good to have you on there, hon. I see you coming on. She was a child in our youth group in our ministry back in Millington. Rosanna was she was a little girl, a little time in way down in single digits when we were pastoring there.
Donations.
Yeah, you can also make donations. You can do any kind of our offerings, whether it's feast offerings or new moon offerings. Our next new moons, I also someone asked me, so I got a couple of them up here. All right, these are the next new moons that are coming up. Rosh Chodesh Tevet, we just went through the new moon Sunday night, last night. And so the next one will be December the 31st, will be the next new moon. Some of you like to kind of know ahead of time. Rosh Chodesh Shavuot is January the 29th. Those are the next two new moons. And we'll be having live services. I'll talk to you about the December 31st one because that's right in the middle of Hanukkah. We'll talk about that in a little bit. When it gets a little closer to that time. We'll give you some of the details on that. All right. So God bless you. Thank you for being a part of the broadcast tonight. We will be back Wednesday night with our Hebraic Bible study. It'll be a fresh new study. We have finished up the priesthood. The royal priesthood is finished up. So we'll have something new on the table for Wednesday night. Unless, of course, something major transpires or take place that we'll need to address, we'll do that. But plan on being back with us Wednesday night at 7 o'clock for our broadcast on the Prophetic Update on our Bible study. God bless you. Thank you for being with us tonight. We will see you Wednesday night at 7. Thank you for being part of the broadcast tonight.